Let's now look at some of these tenses. I've picked this passage here in Mark about cleansing the temple because in a very small space there's a lot of different tenses being used. The tenses in Greek are somewhat like the English tenses. We have a present and we have imperfect and perfect past, and we have the future tense and pluperfect. These are sort of like English tenses, and we can understand that, and then different ways in which the tenses are used, with indicative, imperative, subjunctive, etc. We're using different patterns of underlining for the tenses, and then we mark them with as different colours depending on how those tenses are used. So let's have a look at the beginning. So the first verse here is what we got. We've got, first of all, these dashes. That's the present tense. And we've got simple underlines. That's the aorist tense. Now, the aorist tense is, as I said, a default tense. It's one that you use when you're not thinking it's past, present, or future. You're just thinking this is part of the narrative. This is what happens next. This is the storytelling tense. So we have they come to Jerusalem, if you like, because it's a present tense. And, well, they entered or they enter. It doesn't matter because it's just the aorist tense. Now look at the different colours. So this present tense here, they come to Jerusalem. That's the black. That's the indicative. That's just the normal way in which we speak. That's the default. But then here it's blue, and here it's magenta. See the magenta, that's the participle, that's the ing word. So they're driving out those who are buying in the temple. And this blue, this is the infinitive. So that's to do something. Oh, and that's how it's translated, to drive out. Now notice the underlining is only on one word. The computer picks the most significant word in the group and marks that. Perhaps a human should come along and underline the drive instead of the out, or underline them both. But the computer picks the word that signifies the action, and you can use your own head to figure out, hey, it's actually talking about to drive out as well. We have tried getting tagging to mark all the words which are implied by the Greek, but you get too much overlap because the Greek also refers to the subject and the object, and that's being tagged in different ways. And then you leave words out, and then people think that, oh, those words aren't implied in the Greek, where of course they are. So it's easier to just tag one word in the English for each word in the Greek or the Hebrew, and then you know which goes with which, and you can see what it flows into in the text. So to drive out in the present there, the blue for infinitive, and it's the dashes because it's a present. So the first verse here is setting the scene, that he comes to Jerusalem, he's entering the temple, and he begins to drive out those who are selling and those who are buying in the temple. Now, you could translate it like that, with each tense translated like you would say it in the English, but that's not the way one does translation. When someone at the UN is translating, they translate something as if it was said originally in the language that they're translating into. And when we tell a story about the past in English, we use the past tense. They came to Jerusalem and he entered the temple and he began to drive out those who sold and who bought in the temple. We put it into the past tense as part of a story that happened in the past. And the translators quite rightly do that here. But it's always useful to know what the tense is in the Greek, because sometimes that gives you an extra insight. For instance, here, he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. This allow here, this is the long tense. This is the imperfect tense. It's in the past, but it carries on for a long time. So this isn't just a point action that Jesus is doing. This is something he was continuing to do. He wouldn't allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. Now, the tenses we have here, they're marked up specifically for aspect. That is, looking at whether something is short or something is long. I prefer to think of the tenses as past, present and future, and secondarily as aspect. So I prefer a different set of underlining. Let me show you what I mean. If we minimize this, we can click on Advanced Configuration. Don't be frightened of the advanced, but you can choose different ways in which things are marked up. So I prefer to mark it up on verb tenses. So let's see what that looks like. And then we apply that. And now we can see, okay. So the imperfect now is pointing backwards, because the imperfect is in the past, but it carries on in the past. So we've got long arrows in the past. It's something that's carrying on for some time in the past. Whereas the perfect, that's in the past, but it happens sort of on one occasion or on discrete occasions. Now in Greek, the perfect also has a special sense that it can not carry on happening into the present, but it does something which is done and is still being there in the present. So it does have a sense of long in its effect, but the action is in the past in a specific time or specific moments. So it's like short arrows for the past. The aorist is got just simple underlining because it isn't past, present or future. And the future, of course, has got arrows towards the future. And the pluperfect, well, that's that's like the foundation of the past. It had already happened. So it's got a double underline. That's done and sorted and finished. But you'll have different ideas of how you want to represent these different tenses, and I suggest you do change them. You can pick whatever you want. You can use all these different symbols. You can decide to have wavy lines for the imperfect, as if something's would carry on and carry on and carry on. And whatever you pick, you'll be sure to remember. So you won't be struggling thinking, oh, what does this symbol refer to? If you pick it for yourself, then you'll remember. But I do prefer this long arrow in the past, if I can find it. Yes, long arrow in the past, as something that happened over some time in the past. So when Jesus here would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple, we know from another gospel that he actually constructed a whip, and he was forcibly telling people, no, you can't cross through the temple. The temple, of course, was a huge area in Jerusalem. And if you wanted to get from the east of Jerusalem to the west of Jerusalem, you took a shortcut through the temple. Everyone did it. And there were people carrying burdens instead of going round the top of the temple or going south underneath the temple. They're just crossing across the temple with their deliveries. And Jesus wouldn't allow that. And he stood there probably for hours, just saying, no, you're not going to use my Father's house as a shortcut. This is a place for worship. And he said, no, you're not going to carry on buying and selling because you've made this house of prayer into a den of robbers. And notice here it says, it is written. There we are, the perfect, that's the short action. It was written down at one point, given to the prophets to write, given by God as a message in one action. But the perfect in Greek continues its action into the present. It's still written. It was written and it still remains written. My house will be called a house of prayer. And notice these are both passives. Here we see that the background to the underlining is sort of orange color, like here. So it is written, passive, and my house shall be called a house of prayer. But you have made it into a den of robbers. And then it says the crowd was astonished. And there we are. It's long past again, so they remained astonished. This was an astonishing thing for them. They weren't just suddenly amazed that he'd knocked over the tables. They continued to be amazed as he wouldn't allow people carrying things through the temple and insisted that this was the house of prayer. And then when evening came, the aorist It's not a tense telling us it happened then. This was just the next thing that happened as part of the narrative. Now, it's interesting here to open up a different Bible. If we open up the King James Version, what's the King James Version? Sorry, I always get lost, so I type it in KJV, and then it pops up, and the King James Version. So if we look at that, and let's look at it in columns because it's easier to read that way. And here we get we get to see them both. So the King James is on the right and the ESV is on the left. And see, we were looking at verse 15. So, and now we've got the same sort of underlining for them, as you'd expect. And is it not written? And it should be called the house of prayer. As you, oh, hang on, but ye have made it a den of thieves. That's the aorist tense, the default that you made into den of thieves. But in the ESV it has, but you have made it. That's the perfect. So something that happened, that you made it into a den of thieves, and it's remained a den of thieves. Whereas in the King James Version, it's just something that happened and is a default tense, the aorist. A slight difference in the manuscripts that are used by the King James translators and the manuscripts used by the ESV translators. Occasionally you get this. It doesn't make a great deal of difference here, or maybe you might be able to discern a difference there and might be able to find some great significance there which I haven't spotted yet. And it just happens that here we also have the destroy. The scribes and chief priests, they sought how they might destroy him. Now notice there, that's the future tense, pointing to the right, to the future. Whereas here in the ESV, they were seeking a way to destroy him. And by having that as the aorist, that's taking the emphasis off the destroy and putting it onto the seeking. This is what they're seeking to do. This is a long tense. This is what they're actively trying to do, looking at Jesus all the time, trying to find a way to destroy him. Whereas in the King James Version, the emphasis is much more on this will happen. They sought how they will destroy him. Actually, it's strange. Here we have in the ESV, you see that the Greek behind it is a subjunctive. That is something that might happen, that's something that would happen. But that's how it's translated in the King James Version, how they might destroy him. They translated it as if it's a subjunctive. And in the ESV, it's translated as if it was an indicative, or a normal, not subjunctive. Yeah. Perhaps the ESV translators had half an eye on the manuscripts, which had it as indicative. But they also had I can't second guess what the translators were doing there. But the interesting thing is we can see what the manuscripts say. We can see what was there in front of them. And we can see behind the text and see those tenses as they're being used. They don't always tell us exactly what we need to know, but they tell us more than we can see in the English.